Hi everyone, wanted to do a video today to rectify a few issues with my car, a Seat Ibiza 2007. Had some problems with the dash panel. There was no lights on warning or indicator noise. So previously I removed the instrument cluster and exchanged the speaker, which has cured that fault. Unfortunately, you do have to take the needles off for the dials to do that. And I think I need to alter my dials. The temperature gauge is reading a little bit low and the fuel gauge is reading a little bit high, which is obviously not ideal, so we need to rectify that. First thing we need to do is reach underneath the steering column and free the release lever. We want the wheel as far forward and as far down as it'll go to give us access to these two screws here. First of all, get those out and then come back. Okay, with those two screws out, should allow us to prise out each side. And there's one little clip there and there's another one up here. If we do that on both sides, obviously just started to rain, so excuse the rain noise. Okay, so both sides of that one are out. There's also two more retaining clips up at the top of the binnacle, just where my finger is here. Hope you can see that okay. There's one. And there's two. Now we can pull this out. There's another retaining clip just here and one on the other side. And a little bit of fiddling. Binnacle shroud will just pop out. It's retained by these tabs on the top of it and at the side. Okay, so we can see two of the retaining screws up here for the actual binnacle itself, but we've also got two screws down behind this panel. A little piece of leather there, so we need to remove that. To do that, there's a little clip on either side of the steering wheel, which just pops out. And the same on the other side. There we go. The top cowl will then just lift up. these pieces of trim, that's where the first screw we took out came from. Same on the other side. So when we refit, we put that in before the binnacle cover. We've now got access to the lower binnacle retaining screws as well. So 4 in total, 2 at the bottom and another 2 at the top there. Just be careful when you're trying to remove these that you don't actually lose the screw. If it drops down, you would have to take the bottom cover off to try and find it again. Okay, we've got one. We've got 2. Got 3. And we've got 4. That's all the retaining screws out the instrument binnacle, which we can now try and manoeuvre forward to remove the plugs. On the left hand side we have the plug at the back with the little tab on the side. If you pull that little tab towards you, okay, so last time I did this, the video was terrible. You couldn't really see anything, and I lost some of the footage, so I'm just going to do it again. Instrument cluster as it comes out of the car has 4 screws on the back. I've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. That is the speaker that I've already changed on this unit, which gives the lights on, buzzer, the indicator click and the low fuel warning. So as I say, we've been in this previously, but unfortunately not set the needles back to where they need to be. I don't particularly want to strip it all down to that level again, because when you take the needles off, they do have a black cover on them which you have to prise off. Unfortunately the plastic tabs broke on one of those. I don't know if it was fuel or temperature, so I've had to glue that cover back on, and you do need to take all the needles off again to actually get that far into it, but I'll see if I can see what I can show you in the meantime with regard to that repair, because it's definitely worth doing. I think the part was quite cheap off eBay. I'll try and put a link in the description at the bottom. It did come from Germany, but it was quite easy to arrive. It only took a couple of days, and it's well worth doing. Okay, so we've taken 4 screws out the back of this. We've got some plastic tabs, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Back cover will pop off. And it's also possible to pull the dials themselves straight out of the binnacle. Okay, so what I need to do is to make my fuel gauge show lower than it is doing, and I'm just going to do that. The needles are an interference fit on spindles, so I am just going to take that around a little bit like that. The temperature gauge, I need it to show slightly higher than it is doing. Okay, it's not got enough room there to just turn that round and move it around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, I will show you the whole thing again. I'll take all the needles off. The black covers over the needles, I've got 2 little plastic pins in the middle of them. Something like this forked trim tool is good for popping these off and also for removing the needles. Okay, so the Speedo one just pulled off because it wasn't very tight. I don't think any of these are going to be as tight as they are from the factory, but they can be quite tight to get off originally. Okay, these are all coming off okay, so it must be the fuel one that I've glued. Yes, it is. Okay, it's quite easy to know when you've set these correctly. The tacho and the Speedo, because obviously they just need to point at 0. I am just going to mark that fuel gauge because I was able to get that back where it needs to be. Just going to put a little dry wipe mark where that needs to point. Temperature needs to come forward a little bit, so I'm going to put a dry wipe mark on there where I want that to be. Okay, so we can pop these needles off now. I'm just going to try and get the fuel gauge off without removing the black cover. I don't think you need to take it off. Just have to remember that I need to glue that back on again. That creaking is the needle sliding off. And they are stiff quite right till the end. Okay, so that's come off with the cover on, which is good. Let's get the temperature off. The same procedure. Quite difficult with that in the way there, but you can get the tool in. There we go. Speedo and tacho. Okay, so we've got all of that off there. The overlay has little fasteners just here, so you just clip it past those. Your overlay then removes, and all your dials are free as well. I'll show you the original repair that I did, which got me to this stage. The white housing is just clipped on at various points around the board. So if you press the clips in, press that through, press that through, there are steel tabs on both the LEDs. If you pop those off the board, same on the other side, the white panel just lifts off and lifts away from the board itself, so you can spin that round. And the actual speaker, glad we got to this point because I can show you it. The speaker on the back of the board there is the one which I changed. If we look on this side of the board, you can actually see the 3 mounting brackets for it. We've got the little pin that's plastic that comes through, but then we've also got the 2 solder points just above my finger there. So I basically desoldered the old one just using the sucker and wick, popped it off, and the new one fit right into place on there. Another thing to note, you'll notice I've not taken this off. I didn't try taking that top spindle off. I wasn't quite sure if it'd go back on again properly, so I didn't need to take that off, so I didn't do it. Once you've done your speaker repair and changed it over, you can pop the white overlay back on. Pay special attention to this part in here. On that spindle there's a white stick that moves at the bottom of it. That fits in between 2 switches, and it must go in between the 2 switches when you refit it. That's just to make sure it operates properly. Okay, clip the white back on. Something else that happened to me the first time I did this job, on the LCDs themselves there is behind it a little white piece of paper. That's a little diffuser just for the LED backlights. So just check when you've finished, make sure there's nothing on there, something I didn't do the first time. I had to take it off to put that diffuser back in, or else you get the LEDs just showing through as round light underneath it. White back in, back on. Make sure you hear the clicks for all the LED tabs, and they sit securely where they should do on the back of the board. Okay, everything's pressed back on. Drop the overlay back on. Just make sure it presses down past the locators on these white spindles. And then we're ready to put the needles back on. What I found with the needles, the easiest way to do, they will spin on the shafts. So if you put the needle on above where you want it to be, holding the back of it as well on the motor just so it doesn't stress anything, you can then twist it to where you want it to sit. The one that's sitting on 0, which I've got. Do the same with the tacho. Oh, that wasn't good. Just had the motor trying to pop off there. Let's just lift that off again. Okay, that's got put back into place. Yeah, that's why it's really important to hold the back of it when you're seating them. Okay, and again, it's going to take that to, so it sits at 0. That's slightly below. Let's go all the way around and go back a bit. Really fiddly getting these right, but it's so annoying if they do end up wrong in the car. Okay, I'm sitting at the 0 there. Another thing to do when you make sure the needle's on is make sure they're not pressed on too much. It must move freely. First time I did this job, I pressed the tacho on too far. It was rubbing on the back, and unfortunately it couldn't spin, so the tacho didn't move. Right, here's the tricky ones. Temperature gauge, I've got my black mark just here of where I want that to sit. So I'm going to put it on above it. And it's gone too far again. It's worth spending time once you get used to the car and get used to where the needles sit. You don't particularly want it showing anything different. Okay, let's try that again. Holding the back while I press it on. I'm just going to my point that I made before. Okay, that's perfect, so it's slightly higher than it was. It should now show the correct reading. Fuel gauge, let's put this fuel gauge on. And this is the really important one, obviously. So we want to be very careful and get that to show. Okay, that's pointing to where I think it should be. Cap's glued onto that one, so we don't have to worry about that. The other caps, quite difficult to see. I'm not sure if you can. There's 2 plastic spindles inside. Those locate into 2 holes actually on the and just clip on. As I say, just make sure the needle can move freely, and the cap's back on again as well. Cap back on the speedo. It will only go one way, these, one side's thicker than the other. Now, I don't know if you could hear that, but that is dragging a little bit. I need to raise that. Okay, that's much better. Although it's not sitting on 0. Okay, that is. Right, last cover going on the tacho. Nice. Nice when it just clips on there. and that's sitting at 0 as well. Okay, I can drop that into the binnacle, making sure that the little stalk pops through there, or it should do okay. Okay, that's located. Little knobs come through there. That sits on there. That sits around it. And we can get those 4 screws back in there. It's really frustrating doing this job and then having the needles out or something not working properly, like that diffuser for the LEDs. So hopefully this video will stop someone making the same mistakes that I did the first time and encourage people to do it. It's not a challenging job, just a couple of steps that you need to take to make sure that everything's still in it when you put it back, and that everything looks okay before you put it back. I've got my fuel gauge, temperature gauge set where I want them. Everything else is at 0. Everything's back in. Let's get it back in the car. Okay, so gonna sound a bit like a Haynes manual. Installation, reversal of removal. Okay, we'll start with the right hand connector. This is more by feel than anything else. You can see it slightly from the outside, but you're still feeling around a lot. Okay, right hand connector's on. And left hand connector just pushes back in. Okay, so they're both in. Right, at this point, it's better off just checking and making sure everything's doing what it should do, in case you do have any issues. Okay, indicators are working. Lights are working. Lights on, buzzers working. Tacho's fine. And no warning lights, so that's all good. Start to replace mounting screws first of all for the binnacle. Again, these are pretty fiddly to get in there. You don't want to be dropping them. Spend a long time recovering them. one in. Oh, there goes one for me to find later. Two in. Okay, I've got 3 on in there. I will find and recover that other screw later. Just to carry on with the video, I'll continue with the reassembly. We're going to get this trim piece in and just locate those brackets. This needs to sit like that in the vehicle. So we're just going to make sure that this trim piece sits down here where it should do. Can be quite fiddly at first, but once it sits in position, you'll know that that's where it goes. Okay, so that is what you're aiming for it to sit like. It does help if that's clipped back in, so you've not got the front plastic to mess with. Okay, I've got one side, got 2 sides. Okay, so just to show you, that needs to be sat so that that black plastic hole is free for the screw to go through that holds the trim, and the same on the other side there. And then put the binnacle itself back in, just the housing for it, slide it up in the top, locating the tabs at the top, a little bit tight, pull the creaky plastic, top clips in. On each side there's a locator here and one further down at the bottom there. I'll just slide those into position on both sides. Clip your bottom trim back round. Just make sure everything lines up as it should do. Had a bit of trouble with this side previously. Sticking out like that. I'll just take it off camera while I fiddle with that and just try and get it to sit a bit neater. Okay, so a little bit of fiddling later, I've got this gap where it needs to be. I'm not quite sure why it didn't go there to start with, but it is there now. So get the two screws back in the top to hold the cowl on. On that side. On that side. And then finally we've got the trim retaining screws. On that side. Don't want to drop any more. Right, so there we go. Everything's back together. Everything's working okay. I'm going to readjust the steering column to where it was. And set the clock. All done. Fuel gauge is looking as good as it did. It's telling me I've got 35 miles of fuel left, so I'm guessing that fuel light's going to come on any moment, and it's just touching the top of the red, which is exactly where it needs to be.